Happy Wine Wednesday, everybody. I've got my Seahorse glass and Pinot Noir. And I've got Sophie, Ray, and Holly keeps jumping in and out. But here we are. We are quite a bit late. Sorry, guys. That's, as usual, my fault. But we did talk about the fact that Sophie is learning how to start the program when I am going to be late or when I can't make it. So hopefully this won't be a regular occurrence from here on out. But we're here and we're open for questions. I know that we have a couple of people that were lining up for guests, but I don't want to announce anything until we have dates ready and all that good stuff. So for tonight, again, it's open chat. Kelly's still ultra busy and going crazy at work, so that's why Sophie's taking the reins a bit, and she's going to be helping run stuff from here on out. But for today, again, just open chat. Any questions you have about seahorses, saltwater, any of that good jazz, that's what we're here for. And just here to get together with the community and see how everybody's doing. With that being said, Sophie, how are you doing, and how are the seahorses?
I'm good. The seahorses are also good. Fitz is still pregnant. He's not given birth to the fry prematurely, and I'm just kind of waiting. His pouch is very big now. They should arrive around this Sunday, so by next Wednesday I will have. Hopefully, I'll have the fry.
Yay! I miss babies so much. I miss seeing them. I miss hearing about the fry and seeing you get better and better at taking care of them. That's going to be amazing. And look, I'm trying to see behind you because they keep swimming out, but it's like, which one are we seeing?
They're both here.
Okay. So they're still flirting and dancing, and she's like, come here, Prego, right?
Yeah.
How cute.
You can see them?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see them.
Hi, Bonnie.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
You can see his face that turns really dark when they're flirting with each other.
Yep.
Yeah, mine always did too.
But so he's all heavy pouch and ready to have babes.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I'd say if he's flirting, he's about ready. Very close.
Okay, I'm really excited for it.
Have yours flirted the whole time, Sophie? Or is this like they just started flirting again?
I would say they have flirted throughout. Like, I feel like they kind of just sometimes they just
finish
flirting.
Well, so what I was going to say is what I noticed with mine is that they would always like greet each other every day and then like have a rendezvous. They'd go, swim the tank and, spend some time together, but not the heavy, like where they're turning bright colors and knocking against each other and spinning. That would happen when he was closer to labor and closer to ready to take, she's making eggs. So she's ready to flirt again or whatnot. Ray, what are your thoughts? Did they flirt the whole time they're pregnant, or did they start getting frisky?
I've never had any that flirted during the pregnancy. They had meetups, but not any dancing.
Gotcha.
Maybe
same here.
It's like people; they have varying degrees of sexuality, and maybe she's a little bit oversexed.
Right. And so, Sophie, do you know what we mean by when we say there's a difference between they meet up, they spend time together, but the actual look at how frisky hers are. They're all over the tank. I love it. But
yeah.
Do you know what we mean by the dancing?
Wait, is it the? No, I do not know the difference.
So for me, the seahorses might, get together in the same area, and they're obviously communicating, and they might even lock tails and swim across the tank and whatever. But when they are doing the flirting, that's when you start seeing color changes. That's when you start seeing them like swim upward in a circular motion. Guys, help me with this. What do you think, Holly? What adds to the flirting?
Yeah, I'm trying to watch hers because they're pretty active. They're swimming up to get, so they're like in that stage, I think. And with mine, Sandy was always kind of reclusive when he was pregnant. He acted like he was uncomfortable, like he thought something was wrong and didn't know what to do with about it. But then, like at the end, when he was close to giving birth, he'd get really horny
Yeah,
again.
nice way to put it. Ray, do you agree? What's the difference, Ray, between meetups and flirting?
Cool. I don't know how to explain it other than one's just a mild performance and another one's an extreme. Here, I'm going to put a link on so that she can watch and see.
Well, it looks like they're kind of dancing in the background. I'm watching them, and they're kind of starting
Yeah.
to. They're getting frisky, swimming around together.
Yeah.
And see, guys,
There's-
even
They're not doing the
Okay,
dance, but they look. It
Here's
looks.
a link you can
thinking
check out
about
and you
it.
can see an actual mating dance.
okay, I'm gonna share it with everybody here in a second. But I would say anybody watching, I love that Sophie is able to do this. I never could figure out how to do it right next to my tank. But seeing her seahorses, I mean, that's how my seahorses always were. Like every tank has always been like really active, and it's just such a joy to come home to seahorses. So even though we're talking about hers having fry, the activeness and them being all over the tank, that's normal to me. Like I love it. I love watching them. So interactive.
I have different experience that way. I
What?
found that there was quite a variance in their performance like that. But even within the same species, I've had red-eyed that one tank of them really active all the time. Another tank with another pair, hardly active at all. This is at the same time.
Yeah, Scrappy Doo and Sandy were different because Scrappy Doo was constantly going, and Sandy, when he got pregnant, he acted like he thought something was wrong. You know, he thought something was wrong with him, and he'd kind of
But Scrappy
hide
Doo had problems,
and
right? Didn't he? Didn't Scrappy
huh?
Doo have issues?
No,
Okay. I thought he
mm-mm.
was like
No. Sandy did. He was the one that he kept getting infections, you know, internal infections, and I finally lost him
right.
young, but he was the one that got pregnant all the
Right.
time. Scrappy Doo, I don't know whether or not he was ever pregnant. There were some times when I thought he might be, but he never had fry, so I don't know with him. But
But
he
wait, time
was
out.
always
Time out. Because you just said he would get reclusive when he was pregnant.
Sandy.
Oh, okay. Okay. Like
Sandy.
he knew something
Yeah,
was wrong.
Scrappy Doo.
Okay.
Scrappy Doo, I don't know if he ever got pregnant or not.
Okay.
I was suspicious that maybe he did and lost them somehow or something. I never saw fry from
But
him.
but your point,
Scrappy Doo was always way
but
more
your point
active than
was that when Sandy, who ended up having multiple infections, got pregnant, he would act like something was wrong. Okay.
Yeah, he wasn't, but he was young and he only had like 5 births, right? Yeah, you know, before I lost him.
So the only reason I was
So
even relating
I
to the
don't know.
story is that the main male that gave me most of my fry, I had different males that gave me fry, but the main first big, bad, huge seahorse that gave me all the fry to begin with, he would absolutely get reclusive when he was pregnant. I had in my tank, I had like a cave, and it became his cave, and nobody went in that cave. He
Yeah,
would snip them, stay out of his cave when he was pregnant, and he
yeah.
would just be in the cave most of the day. and then come out to eat or whatever,
Sandy
almost like
was
he was
like that.
protecting himself. He didn't act like anything was wrong with him. He acted
Mhm.
like he was protecting his
Mhm.
pouch and his lair and his,
See,
whatever.
Yeah.
I found like the opposite of what you guys are saying. I found that he's just as active as he normally is when he's with Fry, except for like the last day before he gives birth. That's when I
Okay.
start to see him become uncomfortable, and that's kind of how I know that he's about to give birth.
Sure.
Other than that, I had a lot of doubts, like at the start when he was pregnant, I had a lot of doubts that he was, because his behavior didn't change at all. And I know that
Gotcha.
you guys had said that
Mhm.
they do become more reclusive, but he didn't. So then I was like, I didn't know if he was, but he was, and his behavior just like doesn't change.
So see, I mean, it really does depend on the seahorse for sure. And like I was saying, with mine, it wasn't that he was worried something was wrong or like stand up. It was
Mhm.
more like he just was a pregnant person, like I was the
Yeah.
same way when I was pregnant. Stay
Well,
away
that
from
was
me,
my
leave me alone, don't
interpretation
touch
of it.
me, don't come in my area.
Yeah.
Yuck. And so maybe it's just the same as humans, where some seahorse males are like, hey, I'm pregnant, whatever, and all bright and shiny and glowy, or you're a Kelly that's like in her cave saying, get away from me. So.
Well, and that's my interpretation of it too. Because I'm seeing his behavior's different, but I don't know
Right.
why. And he surprised me every
Sure.
time. I never knew he was
Sure.
pregnant because he never looked different to me. He never had a huge
Sure.
pouch. And I've had males that had a huge pouch that I thought was pregnant, and they
Sure.
weren't. They were, they were just making themselves look that way to be
Inflating,
impressive.
right.
Over
So
the years,
yes.
I've had a lot of pregnant males, and I found there's a pretty good diversity of their activity levels when carrying. But
Mhm.
in general, I'd have to say they tended to be more reclusive than extrovert.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
and in your case, Sophie, yours don't. That's fine. Totally cool. But that's interesting that you said that you noticed he gets uncomfortable looking right before he gives birth. So let's do it, guys.
Mhm.
Let's go into the discussion. And then again, anybody watching, like if Zen Ginger comes in who doesn't want Fry but wants seahorses, you guys, this is something we all love. We all love the Fry part. But if you're just looking to have a tank of seahorses, ask questions because we're here for your questions too. It's just if we don't have a question, we're going to talk about what's going on with us, right? So, back to the point is when they're about to give birth, do you think the males, I mean, I know that they do have labor, but what does that really include in your guys' opinion? Because one of the things that I talk about in one of my videos is that after they take eggs in, they'll go down and they'll do this moving around to like get the eggs in the right position. And then all of a sudden you start to notice that they're pregnant, and whether they're reclusive throughout the pregnancy or not, it's interesting that Sophie has noticed that or hers at least, her male becomes weird right before. Do you think that's because he's like starting labor? And what do you think?
No idea.
No idea.
Yeah. I just know that he
No.
just looks like, before, when he just looks really uncomfortable, he looks like overly full, like he's
Yeah.
about to pop, right?
Yes.
I don't know. It just, yeah.
And he's already given you a couple batches, right, Sophie?
Yeah. He's given me like 3.5.
3.5. People will be like half. So does
Yeah.
he always give you a warning Fry? Do
He
people
has
know
never
what we mean
given
by
me warning fry.
He never has?
No, I have never seen warning fry.
Oh my gosh. So for anybody out there watching, warning Fry.
I didn't either with Sandy. Sandy always just, and except for his very last time that I raised the almost 200 of them. That time he had them over a period of 2
Yeah.
days. So he started in labor and had a few, and then throughout that day, he kept having more and more and more, and even into the next day. And by the time I had counted all of them, I want to say there was like
So, but
163,
wait.
and that was his
Well, and that
batch.
sounds
It took him
so
a long time.
incredible to you, but like the batches that I had were always like
Mhm,
300 plus. I mean, like insane amounts of seahorses.
mhm,
I know that Dan
mhm.
and Ray had like thousands, so it can
I
vary.
never had 1,000. I just
Not
maybe
from an
Not wait,
680.
erectus.
not even wait, time out. Not even from the reed eye?
No, usually
Oh,
breed I actually the biggest batch I had with them, best I can recall right now, it was probably closer to the 600.
yeah.
But the biggest erectus batch was 682, I think.
Well, it definitely
Mhm.
depends on the species. Depends on. I swear to you guys, I feel like they have a feel for what we can handle. I mean, I know that's not true but I mean,
I can't
like,
even remember for sure. Like with my cognitive impairment, I might be wrong on that 682, but it's the
sure.
figure that's in my head now.
But I'm just saying there's a difference between species. So erectus, a big batch would be 682, a normal batch would be 300, a smaller batch, big to Holly, but smaller to anybody else would be a couple hundred, whatever. And I just feel
I think
like
reed eye on average would be at least 800.
right, reed eye
I
get
just,
that's what
I
I was
just
saying
didn't
to
have
begin
it
with.
myself.
So that's what I was saying to begin with. It depends on the species because certain species have more fry. And
Yeah.
then also, I swear it depends on their circumstances because if you've got species that have been wined and dined by a commercial breeder and really babied and they feel really comfortable and they feel like their fry are going to be, obviously they'll be healthier anyways because they've been fed all this extra foods and just catered to, they give bigger batches. I swear that's true because in mine it was like cool fry, but I wasn't doing the whole conditioning and really catering to them and giving them all this luxury treatment to get them to give me the best fry and the biggest batches. It'd be interesting to talk to Chris Carey about this too, because he did do it on a commercial level, but not a personal level, more at a job. So I'd be curious what he would have to say. But Sophie obviously isn't like conditioning. She takes really good care of her seahorses. But what's the biggest batch they've given you so far, Sophie? Or do you
60.
even count them?
No, I do count them. I think it was like 63, 64, something like that.
So, but that's another thing is when seahorses first start out, they're going to give you smaller batches.
Yeah.
It's always like they're figuring it out themselves. So, they'll give you a really small batch, then a little bigger. Then there's something wrong. They don't give you a batch. Then they give you this. Watch, Sophie's going to have like 800 fry. And she's going to be like, oh my God. Crossfit everybody.
No, that's how Sandy was because he was young. He was about 5 or 6 months old when he started
Right.
having fry. And remember, I lost him young. He didn't live past a year and a half.
Your
So he
favorite
was
Barbary are well known for having batches of 35,
Yep.
50,
Small.
and in that
Yep.
range. Small
I mean,
batches.
my first batch was 18.
Mhm.
So hopefully
Mhm.
I'm going, well, I mean, I just had a batch of 4. But other than that,
Right.
they should probably be going up.
They should be.
You're not going to have anything more than about 200 in that range at the most because of the age of them. They haven't grown enough yet to have the capacity for her to
Mhm.
produce that many
Right.
eggs and for him to be able to give birth to that
Well,
many.
and
But
before it,
as they get older,
well,
they have to be pretty well full size to get in that
Mhm.
600 to 800
right.
range.
And when we're talking full size,
And
we're
that's
talking
likely
when
why
they get to the
Sandy
age
never
where
had
they're,
very many because they were
they're,
both so
they
young.
get big. They get very big.
Mhm.
And what were you saying, Holly? Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying that's likely why Sandy never had very many, because him and Candy were
Yeah,
so young.
sure.
You know, they were both really young having those babies. And I picked up Sadie today, and tomorrow's her birthday. She's turning 5 years old, and
Woo!
I hadn't picked her up in a while, but I picked her up today, and she's
Yes,
huge. I think you're right, Kelly. She's got to be almost a
yes,
foot, maybe like 11
yep.
inches even. She's pretty big. When I picked her up, she was bigger than my hand, and a lot of seahorses, just fit in my finger perfectly. And she was bigger, and I'm like, oh, maybe she is bigger
Well,
than I
happy
thought.
birthday to her, first of all. And second of all, absolutely. And that's why, for anybody new that doesn't care about all the fry talk, but is interested in seahorses, that's why we start out with that recommendation of 30 gallons per pair, is because they come to you and they're this big, but they get this big. I mean, dead serious, they can get that big if you take care of them.
Mhm.
And so they get really big, they get really they need the space, and because they're such big creatures, when they get older they need that
Mhm.
filtration and that water volume to handle their eating load, their
Mhm.
digestive load, all that good stuff. But back to the fry,
Mhm.
I would just say I agree with Ray. They have bigger batches as they get older, but again, anybody who out there is trying to go commercial, we have a lot of guests or people that come to the show that want to go to a commercial level as a hobbyist, and there are things you can do
Mhm.
to make them start having bigger batches earlier. And they all include conditioning, which would be um, picking the pair that you want to have the fry and giving them luxury, literally, like, live foods,
Mhm.
enriched foods constantly, having them in a different separate area where they just have all the space and very water.
Their own
Huh? Yeah,
apartment.
their own little yeah.
Their own apartment, give them their own condo.
So you can absolutely, do things to entice bigger batches. And then if you're just a hobbyist like Sophie, you can watch them have bigger batches as they go and figure things out on a smaller scale. Bonnie said Teresa has a series on her YouTube channel about how she cares for her aquarium and her fry. She has had much success raising them. Yeah, Teresa's great.
Maybe share a link
Yeah,
so we
share a
can check
link.
it out.
I
I don't
do
think
want to
I've seen that.
go back and share the link that Ray shared. Who is the person that you shared, Ray? Because we got to give them credit if we're going to share their video. I think you're muted. The
I think you're
video you
muted,
shared
yeah.
of the dance, of the seahorses dancing. Who made the video?
That's just Google. I just Googled it.
Okay. Well, everybody pay
Oh,
attention
just a
to the
random video.
maker of the video, so we give credit here. But here we go.
And hey, maybe Sophie will get lucky this time and she'll raise some seahorses with a close birthday to
Yeah.
Sadie's.
All right, here we go. Can you guys see?
Well, we'd never hear the end of it.
Can you see what I'm sharing?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, here we go. So the Curio Cat produced this. You guys can't hear the music, I don't think.
Look at all the boys.
And you guys can't hear the voiceover.
No, can't hear the
He's saying
video, but
everything.
look at all those boys in there.
I take exception to that several days because most of
Hang on,
mine
Ray. Hang
got pregnant
on, because
again.
I can't hear you while she's talking. So let's let the video finish and we'll talk about. All right, let's. I want to talk about noodling, but what did you want to say, Ray?
Most of mine would get pregnant the same day they had birth.
Okay.
So there was no several days
Mhm.
to it.
And she actually
That's
mentioned noodling. Have you guys ever heard the term noodling?
no.
Hats off to people creating words. All good with me. You know, I mean, it was a cute video.
Yeah.
But
I say my seahorses are canoodling when when they're
well, no,
when
she
they're
just
getting
acted like it
frisky
was a
with each
term in
other. I'll
Seahorse
say that.
world. Like, they're
No,
noodling.
I haven't heard it. But one thing I noticed, did you see
Yeah.
all the males? There's a lot of males in that, so they were actually kind of
So,
competing
and
in
in
that,
many of
in
my,
that
I wish
video.
I had the time and the energy to go back to making videos. Sophie, you need to start. You need to start a channel or use the Seahorse Whisperer channel. I'll give it to you. And I mean, you need to provide videos with good information because that was not a bad video. That was a great video. Hats off to the video maker. Curio Cat, very good video. But there are instances where males do the courting dance, and you think it's
Yeah, they're
yeah,
sizing each other up. That's what I
yeah.
saw in that video, and it was really
So
cute.
maybe that's
And I
noodling.
haven't had a whole lot of
What?
males together. Yeah, I haven't had a lot of males together like that because most of my babies were
Mm-hmm.
females. I had very few males, and then I actually sold most of my males and only kept a few, and then those ones tended to be my first losses were males. So my females are living longer than the males, I'm finding. So I have, of course, Dandy now, and he lives alone in a tank with Sadie. So he's the only male there. And in my other tank, I have one male and
Mm-hmm.
3 females. So he's like the king of his own little harem. He doesn't have to compete with anyone, so I don't get to see that, the male
Well, you
bickering
never
and
had that
stuff
though,
that
did
goes
you?
on.
In any of your tanks? I don't. I just feel like you.
A little bit, but it was always very brief because, like I said, I didn't have the males long. They got sent to other people, and so there was time periods when I'd have a few males in a tank, but in the grow out tank there was more of it than in my display tank because Dandy, he's different from any other seahorse I've ever had. And he got along with everyone pretty much. But he did have bickering over Sadie. He's always been very protective of Sadie. And from the time I moved her into that tank when she was a juvenile, I moved her in with a younger brother who was much smaller because he was the lone survivor of his batch. So he was still little guy, but I didn't have anywhere else for him to go really. So I put him in that tank. And as soon as he saw the big seahorses and figured out, what it meant to be a male seahorse, he started going after his mom and Sadie both. And Dandy made friends with Sadie right away and tried to protect her from her brother's advances. And it was so sweet because Sadie was so shy and so coy that she was kind of scared of her brother that was
Mm-hmm.
coming after her. But she always loved Dandy because he didn't manhandle her. He didn't grab her by the tail and wrestle her around. He sat next to her calmly and ate meals together. And he got along with the male seahorses too. But when they were pursuing Sadie, it was different. He'd
Mm-hmm.
try to stop them.
So anybody watching,
But
I've got two things. I gotta say two things.
between
A,
them.
we're not talking about a soap opera. Believe it or not, we're talking about Holly's tanks.
Right?
And Holly, so
It
there
is
are
like a
different
soap
types of
opera.
seahorse keepers.
There.
Holly names her seahorses, and she has families, and her tanks are families, and that's amazing and wonderful. They have names, they have lives, they have personalities. Everybody's seahorses do. She just can literally say, so Sadie was messing with Sammy, and yeah. So we're not talking about soap, we're talking
I'm
about actual
observant of
seahorses
them.
still. And B, I would just like to get down to the basics of what everybody has just been saying. And I would like to say and ask if you guys agree that tanks with more males are going to be, I don't want to say more active, but more, more active, I guess. Because a tank, wait, hang on, let me
I
finish.
would say more
So I've had
active.
tanks with a lot of females or just a few females and a couple, more females than males. And they're not active. They're still active, and they're very present, and you see them swimming, and you see them together in their community. They just don't constantly compete. Okay, so females aren't constantly saying, hey, look at my pouch, and let me swim around you and show you how macho I am. And the males just seem to you notice them more. So if you're looking for an active, really active tank where you want to, see their personalities and stuff, the males can be more entertaining because they're constantly sizing each other up and chasing the females and that kind of thing.
I will say my tanks were more active with more males.
Yeah.
Definitely. And now, like I said, now that the competition aspect isn't there, they're all happy. And in this tank where I have 4, there's 1 male and 3 females. They still move around the tank. They hang out with each other in different groups. The females hang out with each other as well as with him. So they're doing stuff throughout the day, moving around the tank, but it's not that competition
yours
aspect, like
yours
you said.
Older. I think that age plays a
older.
part too. When they get older, they're just kind of set in their ways, and they're not competing to make fry because they're not making fry anymore. But what's interesting to me is that with Sophie's tank, you see they're very active. You see it every week. But it's more, it's almost like the luxury hotel that commercial breeders give their breeding pair, because it's just them. They don't have competition. They're able to just concentrate on each other. So I'm excited and curious to see where this goes for you, Sophie, because Sophie does want fry. And so we're going to have them, obviously. And we're going to get her. So, and I would say too, as we go along in this journey, Ray and I have very different methods of raising fry. And Sophie learned from Ray, took equipment from Ray, and she's using Ray's methods. So if they don't work, Sophie, you'll have to come to my methods. No, I'm just kidding.
Wait, your methods include tubs that take up a lot of space.
I know. And Ray, wait.
You know what? I did it though
Holly,
in little.
I'm going to ask Ray something.
Ray,
your methods worked for you for a very long time, right?
Yeah, but it took me to the 10th time to succeed.
So it took you longer to succeed. And did you find that smaller batches were easier? Because I'm just thinking, so what Sophie and Ray are doing or have done is the jar method. Nothing wrong with the jar method. Many successes with the jar method. I've just personally never even tried it, so I can't even really comment. But was it easier if you had fewer? Ray?
I can't really say. It's hard to remember back that long too. But, I think by the time I'd gotten to that 10th, I think the batches then were getting to be bigger.
Sure. So, and with the tub method, with the jar method, at what point do you wean them onto frozen mysis in the jars?
I started there,
Okay.
yeah. But and that depended, like every batch was
Sure.
different. You get some that would take to the frozen food real early and really fast, and then you get some that are sitting there 4 months and you're still fighting
Sure.
with them. Very frustrating.
I followed Susan Hopner's method, and it's just in a small tank. And Heather raised
Sure.
hers the
But
same way.
real quick, back to the jar thing. The reason I always, because I think, Sophie, you got your fry to the point where you were weaning them, right? The last time? No.
I never even got them past a week and a half.
Okay. And okay, well, then we're going to come back to that. But with the jar method, that's always been my fear because the weaning process was always the hardest thing for me. Getting them onto that frozen food. Once you have seahorses that are giving you fry that stay alive past a week and a half just on brine shrimp that's enriched, excuse me, then it's that weaning process because they'll do great. All of them will survive. And then all of a sudden they're starting to look scrawny. You can tell they're getting bigger. They need that frozen food because you're not able to provide it through even enriched brine shrimp anymore. They need to be transitioned onto frozen food. And they're, I've had batches, like Grace said, that were stubborn and it took forever to get them to eat. And then you're losing them and this, that, and the other. And I just wondered, well,
I
wait, hang
didn't
on,
lose as many
Holly,
at
hang
that
on.
point,
So
though.
it would be really, I feel like it'd be a lot harder with the jars because you have such a confined space. And even though you're doing either, a new jar every day or whatever process you're doing, I just feel like that food would become a problem in the jar setup.
I would think maybe though, because I raised mine in because I had such small batches, they were growing up in about a 2 gallon max tank. And then being moved as they grew, I went to
Mhm.
5, 10 gallon. They moved as they grew. And so when I was doing the frozen food, when I first started weaning them, then they'd go to a little bit bigger
So that's why I'm
container.
asking Ray, like, how did you handle weaning if you started them on the frozen food in the jars?
Yeah, I usually started in the jars for most of them.
And how did you keep them from, how did you stop from losing some when you're then transitioning to this frozen food?
What do you mean?
I just
Keep from
mean
losing?
you go from this live feed and enriched live feed where green water and whatever system you're using, and then you're trying to wean them on the frozen, and the frozen is so much more is going to create so much more waste, I guess is the point. And then in that small jar,
Let's see what the jars will changing the water every other
right.
day.
Yeah, it's so easy to change the water when they're in a small tank. Like I used to do it, I just make them a new container, a new thing of fresh seawater, and
I
move them
totally
to that,
understand
and
tank
then wash
transfer.
the old one and
I
trade it back
totally
and
understand
forth.
tank transfer. I don't know. I just feel like the buildup would be quicker, and even a day or two might become a problem. But you're saying it did not. So good. That's
No, and I'll put it this way, I got lazy in the last batch that I raised. I didn't change the water all the time because I had a 10 gallon at that point because there were so many of them. So there would be starting algae growing in there, all kinds of stuff, but I didn't lose them as much at the weaning to frozen stage as I did when they were the live brine shrimp stage. By the time I got them, like once they got to where they could eat frozen, my losses majorly slowed down at that
sure.
point. The hardest part was right about like where Sophie says, right
All
about
right.
that
Well, we're
week or
gonna
so
tackle. Okay,
for
we're gonna.
me.
Sophie just stepped away for a second, so when she comes back, we're gonna tackle that. Oh, Sophie's back. All right, we're gonna tackle thoughts on why you might have trouble at that weak stage. But real quick, Tom, I do not want to butcher your last name. So Tom wants to know if we have a source for captive bred seahorses. He is in Southern California. Anybody, any thoughts?
Just if he can get Bella's Seahorses to send him some.
Mm-hmm.
So Bella's seahorses, can we provide?
I forget where she is now.
So Zen's not here tonight. She's not here to provide all my links. Bonnie or anybody, can we provide a link to Bella's? Or
I can.
Bonnie, do you know any sources? I haven't had to obtain seahorses for a minute. I always got my seahorses from Seahorse Source or Seahorse Savvy, and neither one are providing seahorses anymore, unfortunately.
I don't know anything about Ocean Rider at this point. I haven't heard anything about them lately, so I don't know, but they're the only commercial breeder left that I'm aware of in the United States now that we don't have Alyssa's Seahorse Savvy. I mean, we still have her, but she's not doing seahorses. And Bella is a hobbyist breeder, but she's being successful. So I think she would be a
Yep.
good source. And Ocean Rider would be good, I think, but they're out of Hawaii. I don't know if they're still offering seahorses.
Ocean
I
Rider
could look
still
on my
offers
phone real quick.
seahorses. They're very
Are they?
expensive.
They're the only big
Okay,
breeder
so
I
Ocean
know.
Rider is the only commercial breeder currently. They are expensive, but quality seahorses. I would suggest looking at your local fish clubs or looking around in your area. I know Holly had trouble in California just because seahorses weren't a big thing, at least in her area. But look locally.
Mm-hmm. And I'm in too, so there's aquariums in general aren't a big thing up here.
And the big problem right now is that we have a lot of hobbyist breeders coming up, becoming successful with their fry, raising them to adulthood, and then trying to sell them off, but they haven't gotten used to or gotten savvy about shipping. So that's the kind of conundrum we're in, is that the commercial breeders have kind of died off, and the hobbyist breeders that are stepping up and taking up that, that need aren't efficient at shipping yet. But if you find a breeder that's hasn't shipped but wants to ship to you, send them here. We can teach them how to ship. We can help them in any way to get those seahorses to you. But right now, we're looking for sources right along with you to provide to people that will ship to different areas, because many of the Bella's ships though, because Bella
I think she started shipping. I don't know a lot. It'd be great to have her back to give us an update how they're doing, because I see a lot of their videos. They are having more and more fry. I think they're becoming pretty successful.
Awesome.
But I haven't. I'm just too busy. I don't, totally pay attention to everything. So I see all the cute videos and watch that, but I don't know technically, what's going on with them.
Okay, so Ocean Rider is for sure. With Bella's, Holly, can you put a link to Bella's in even our chat, and I can share it, please?
I don't know. I can try, because I don't really pay attention to them, like I said. Let me go look and see what I can find.
Yeah, I mean, surely they have a website, but no problem, Sophie. But and we're gonna have Sophie, but she's not in the US, so she won't be helping us soon. But she'll still be doing good, and she's got something going on, so no problem at all. But I forgot where I was gonna go next. We were talking about, so yeah, Tom, I'm really sorry that we can't say, oh, go to Seahorse Source, but that's the problem, is we need more people to step up, start breeding. And frankly, the reason that the commercial breeders died off is A, because, they did it for years and years and years and then they retired. But B, it's because it is expensive and extensive to raise Seahorse fry. And so captive breeding is not easy, and people don't usually want to pay the price for captive bred because it is expensive to buy all the live foods and all that to raise them. Hey, thanks, Zen Ginger. Look at Zen Ginger's here. Thank you, Zen Ginger. Always with the links. I literally said, Zen Ginger's not here. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get you the link. She's not here. So awesome, Zen. And again, guys, Tom, we love that you jumped into the stream. Sorry, we couldn't give you an instant satisfactory answer. But if you get seahorses or you're preparing for seahorses and have questions, even if we're sitting here talking about fry, because that's what's going on with Sophie, doesn't mean if you ask, hey, how big a tank should I get, we won't answer it. That's what we're here for, is to answer any and all questions. Good point, Zen, the Biota group. I'm going to reach out to Felicia McCulley because she works with them. And yeah, they were providing captive bred seahorses. We need to get... Listen,
the Biota
guys,
group?
I've been working on a website for years, and things change so quickly, and I'm not... I don't have enough time to get anything done quickly, and so it's just never been finished. We need to have like a good listing of commercial and hobbyist breeders to provide to people. Oh, I'm sorry you're missing a kitty. Oh no, I'm sorry. Prayers and cross fingers that you find her. But anyways, back to okay, but like for instance, Marco said, where can I chat with you about setting up a tank? What kind of water? RO or RODI, salt brand, best type of filter, those kind of questions, you don't have to reach out to me. You're welcome to, but you can ask them right here and we can have that conversation. We've had a lot of conversations about new tank setup that you can go back and watch, but right now, right here, if you ask RO or RODI, we'll have that conversation. So let's do that real quick. RO or RODI. Sorry, I can't talk tonight. Ray, what's the difference?
Oh, which RO and RODI? Yeah. Well, one's just reversed osmosis, and the RODI is, first of all, the reverse osmosis takes place, and then you pass it through the deionizing containers. And there's usually two, a primary and a secondary one. Basically, it takes ions out of the water, and it gets the water to a state where you can't even measure pH because there's no ion activity there to be able to get the conductivity.
So I'll put it real simple.
Basically, it's purifying the water.
That's it. Purifying the water. If you use RO, you've got pretty good water. If you use RODI, you have really good water for the seahorses because there's no contaminants. You're taking out anything bad that might be in the water. I personally used RODI or distilled. Like if I didn't want to make the water myself, I would just go buy distilled water. Make sure there's nothing in it. No minerals added, none of that crap.
I mean, yeah, but not everyone is like, didn't you say that you used to go to the store and you would buy so many bottles of distilled water?
I did.
I feel like not everyone's quite, I feel like for some people it might make more sense to just get like a filter.
Absolutely. No, thank you for saying that. Absolutely. I literally got to the point where I was so lazy, you guys, and I did have a problem with water at my house, just to give myself a little bit of excuse. But yeah, I had not a contract, but I had an agreement with my local store where they would buy an extra pallet of water, and then they would set it out back, and I would just buy, I'm talking
it's a lot of water.
Gallons of water.
I go
just
through a
to
lot.
do my tanks. So yes, absolutely, it makes more sense in most instances to get a RODI filtration.
RODI is
Wait,
the way
yes.
to go if
I have a
you're
question. Why didn't you get RODI filtration?
Me,
Yeah.
she had it.
I had it,
hmm
and the system that but I'm cheap. Okay, so
Sometimes you have problems with stuff too.
here's the true
Oh.
story. The true story is I went through Pure Water Club, is just the name. I'm not knocking them. The system was great, right? But I bought like a travel size system, and then I had 20 tanks, so I overused the hell out of it, right? So I overused it, and then I wasn't. So with an RODI system, you're better off to spend money and get a good big one right off the bat with extra DI and all that. Because I went with the cheap one that was just travel size, and then I was making all this water, and of course you've got to change the filters. And so the recommendation for changing these filters was like every 6 months to a year. But they didn't realize I'd be using it to make 150 million gallons of water. So the
So you
filters
needed
would
it
go
more
out.
often.
I wouldn't know which filter was the problem because in this cheap little system I had, it wasn't like color changing or any of the new stuff they have. It was literally, I couldn't, they were white, not see through, and I couldn't see which filter was the problem. So then I'd start buying filters and replacing them. And then that wouldn't help, and the TDS would still be too high. And then I'd just buy a new system, and then it would work for a couple months, and then it'd be the filter problem again. And I was just never smart enough to like upgrade to an efficient.
Maybe it was your bucket, Kelly. Remember what happened to me?
Yes, maybe. But what I'm saying is, for me in my personal situation, it just got easier for me to be like, I'd rather spend the money. I'd rather just buy
get the water.
Yeah. But that's not smart. And you're smarter to start off, as we always say, start off right, and then you don't have to pick up the pieces and spend more money trying to fix stuff or have problems because you just set up right. If you're going to do a big system or you're going to have multiple tanks, invest in an RODI system. I totally agree. What, Holly?
I would say go with, when you're doing your equipment for the Seahorse tank, I would research and go with the best that you can afford, because you put the equipment through a lot. I found with a Seahorse, and you want it to last hopefully as long as your seahorses do. If you're like me and you're not going to keep seahorses forever, that can still be like maybe 8 or 10 years. So the aquarium equipment is expensive. So I say go with the best you can afford. If you're going to stay in the hobby for a long time, you might be looking at 20, 30 years, maybe more, like Ray. Right. So if you have the money to invest, always do your research, look at reviews, see what people say about it. You want to get those 4 and 5 star reviews on the equipment you get, because it's going to be worth it in the long run. You're going to have less trouble. It's going to last longer, be easier for you to deal with. And when I first started with seahorses, on the limited budget that I had, I used some things that weren't that great.
Sure.
And they didn't last long, honestly. And I found they weren't what I needed. And so if you haven't started your tank yet and you have time and you're getting ready and don't just jump into it like I did, then, take the time to invest. If you're on a limited budget like me and you need to, budget ahead of time and get the pieces one by one, do it, because it'll be worth it in the long run. I think you'll have a smoother go of it, an easier experience, more reliable.
And that's why, guys, we always say with seahorses, if you're able, absolutely do a sump. And like I would bet, let's place a bet right now that within 5 years, Sophie's gonna come back and she's gonna be like, now I have a sump. You guys were right. Gotta have a sump. Because I mean, you can do it. She's doing
Yeah.
it. She's doing it well. But
Mm-hmm.
as you start getting more, or as they start having fry or whatever, the sump matters. But you can do it, and she's proving it. I have an all-in-one that does, doesn't have a sump. You can do it, but if you're gonna like set up for long-term seahorses that you want to keep until they're huge and old and amazing, then go ahead and invest and do a sump, do the RODI and all that good stuff. I will also mention though, it depends on where you live. Because Sophie, you don't use RODI, right? Sorry, I know you're dealing with something, but
No, I do not use RODI.
but that's because what's the TDS of your water? When we say TDS, guys, we're talking about total dissolved solids. You can get a TDS meter and test your water. So just for example, before Sophie even starts talking, sorry to interrupt, but my TDS of water out of my tap is 498. 498. That's crazy bad.
Mine's usually just over 100, and Sophie's only a few blocks.
Yeah,
Yours
I was
is
gonna say
100,
you have to
Ray?
ask Ray.
So again,
Was that
my
lucky?
water is 5 times as bad as theirs. So for them, they don't really, it's not as important to do RODI. In my case, if I don't do RODI or distilled, I'm going to have major problems with any saltwater tank. So it does depend on where you live. You can get a water report and find out that, or you can buy a TDS meter, and they're cheap. Just a little stick that you stick in the water, and it'll tell you the TDS. 10,
Mine
20
is
bucks.
generally right around 100 or below where I live. So the water's pretty good, but I still use like what TP is saying here. I have the bulk reef supply. I have a 7-stage, actually, is what I use. And if you remember right, I had experience not long ago where I could not get my TDS down below 30ish, and changed out all my stuff only to figure out that it was the buckets, because I nested them inside themselves that I put the water in. So now that I'm rinsing the buckets out every time before I fill them with RODI, I got my TDS down to between 0 and 3 per bucket, which I'm fine
and
with.
were you testing the TDS after you made the water, Holly?
Yes, but I was testing it in the bucket. I'd stick the tester in the bucket. So what I figured out when I ran the water into a glass instead of my bucket, I had a TDS of 0. When I ran the TDS meter in the bucket, it'd be like 30.
Gotcha.
And so that's how I figured out that it wasn't the water coming out of the system that had a higher TDS.
It was your bucket being
because
dirty.
my buckets were dirty, probably because, like I said, I live in the woods on a dirt road. I nest my buckets inside of each other. And there's always dust in my house, dust in dust in the Seahorse tanks. So there's TDS everywhere here. So once I started rinsing out each bucket, just give it a quick rinse with a sprayer before I ran the RODI hose into it.
No more problems.
No more. And it's got a little bit of TDS. Like I said, they go usually 1 to 3.
So, but what I'm saying is that's what's amazing about Wine Wednesday, guys, is that you can come here and you could be having a problem with your TDS and then hear something like Holly's story and be like, oh shit, I wonder if it's my buckets, right? Because
Right.
all the little things that end up mattering. And TP, you're customizing your BioCube 32 with a sump, including a refugium, 4
cool.
seahorses, I hope. And 750. Yours, oh my God, your TDS is
Mine's
750.
is, yeah.
Woo!
I see they have
RODI.
a 7-stage. That's what mine's a 7-stage also, and it's in my area they use chloramines. So I
I
think
would
that's
say, TP, be ready. I would buy backup filters now because their recommendation where they say, oh, replace the filters after 6 months, you're going to have to sooner. You're going to probably be like me and end up going to distilled water. And for me, it was because in my area, my water bill's so high. My city I'm in a small town,
oh,
so we borrow water. We don't borrow water, but water basically comes from the next town, so
from
it's
another place.
expensive from the
Yeah.
tap, and it's so high in TDS we don't drink it, and we don't use it on the tanks because to run it through that filtration, I was having to replace filters like left and right constantly, like new system every 3 months and stuff, and it just got to the point where I was like, I'd rather just buy distilled water, but that was expensive too.
Another thing I learned from Ray is that don't buy your DI resin too far ahead because it can go bad in storage.
Ooh, good point.
And I didn't realize that. So once Ray let me know that, and I replaced all the DI resin with brand new, I have changing color, because I have the bulk reef supply kind. It does change color. And since I did that a few months back, it's not changing color. It hasn't even changed at all. So
Good.
that was part of the issue too, I think. Because
Yep.
I thought I was doing a good thing by, I'll buy it on sale, I'll buy it ahead.
Yeah.
So I had pouches that I'd had for maybe 6 months or a year.
Yeah, it didn't work anymore. Hey, TP, I want to say to TP, so excited that you're setting up for Seahorses. We always invite people that come to the channel in the chat if you're ever interested in coming into the video and talking about what you're trying to do and having a one-on-one with us where, you can be like, this is what I'm doing. What do you think about this? Or we could, just go back and forth. We love having new Seahorse keepers. I don't think you're new, but you're setting up a new tank. Come in and talk about what you're trying to do and go back and forth. So if you're interested in that, reach out to us, and we'd love to have you in the actual video if you're ever interested, because we love doing that because it does help people down the road that are like, I want to set up for them, but it sounds like this so much work. And it's not, as long as you do it right. If you do it right, it's going to work. So, Sophie, what's next on the list for you? Obviously, you're going to have fry soon.
I'm trying to get the fry to survive.
So let's talk about that real quick because we're reaching that point, guys. We gotta shorten Wine Wednesday. I love seeing you guys every week, but Mama's tired, so we're reaching that. We got a cutoff point, but let's talk about Ray. I'm going to talk to you directly because you and I are the only ones. Well, Holly too, but Holly and Sophie struggle with getting fry past the week and a half point. Why do you think that is? What are your thoughts on that? If that's a problem.
Well, the first thing that I think of is I learned decades ago that not all seahorses can produce viable fry in their early stages. And so there's a possibility there. There's also the possibility that.
So what you're saying for number one is age. The age of the seahorses, whether or not.
I think it's more conditioning of the seahorse.
What do you mean by that?
If the seahorse has been conditioned from its birth, conditioned sufficiently, then it's more able to produce a viable fry within at least the first 3 to 5 batches, but not always. And if it hasn't been looked after properly in its early stages, then it can be even longer, depending on how fast you're able to build up its immune capabilities.
So basically, you've got to get you as a keeper. If you have seahorses that give you fry, but the fry don't live past a week, we're looking at the parents first of all. We're going to look at the parents. We're going to see. We don't know how they were raised, probably because we bought them captive bred at a certain age. But we can now start conditioning them in the case where we're trying to build up their immune systems, give them healthier foods, and rich foods, etc., so that the female can produce better eggs and the male can carry them better.
She has to be, yeah, she has to be in good shape too. Now, we didn't know this back when I started back in 2002.
Sure.
So a lot of this stuff, it wasn't because I neglected to do things that we knew we should be doing. We just didn't know
Sure, I
back
got
then.
you. I got you.
In 2002, half of the population in the hobby still believed that you needed slow water
Right.
conditions.
Holly, what do you want to ask?
So I have a quick question before we move much farther beyond this. In that, so if you're just starting out and you have a pair that you want to breed, let's say, and they're young, would you recommend conditioning them before you give them a chance
Yes.
to breed? So maybe not keep them together where they can breed, but maybe keep them separate. So
No, I wouldn't go
what
to
do
that
you think about that?
So when you say
No,
conditioning,
I wouldn't go to that extreme. But the thing is, back then we didn't know.
right?
Like we had seahorses
Ray,
that
we
were
know you
concave
guys didn't
and
know, but
straight-sided.
now,
But now I'm wondering, like, if a commercial breeder, let's say they have stock they want to breed and they're young juveniles, should they be keeping males and females separately and conditioning them, with the live feeds and before introducing them
you know
to
why
breed?
I don't agree with that is because I think that the breeding is a learned practice also. They have to learn how to
I think
dance.
so too.
They have to learn how to do an egg exchange. They have to learn that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, if you have batches that have fry that are weak or not living past a week and a half or 2 weeks, then we're going to look to the parents first. I agree with Ray 100%. But it's not really about looking, like, if you are starting out wanting to breed, it's not about separating them and all that, because you want them to go at it. You're trying to build their immune system. It's not
To go
about
through the
their
process.
figuring out how to breed. It's about building up their immune systems and I know what you're asking, Holly,
He
because
was talking
hang
about
on. I know what Holly was asking because Dan used to separate his breeders. So he would take
That's a different thing.
the pairs that he wanted to make fry for him, and he would put them in a completely separate system, completely separate tank, so that he could cater to them, give them the live feeds, give them the really super clean water and all that good stuff. But that wasn't, he wasn't separating the pair. He was putting them together and conditioning them, meaning building up their immune systems, giving them good foods, making them healthier to provide better eggs and a better pouch to store the eggs, not giving them time to figure it out, if that makes sense. What were you going to say, Ray?
Well, it makes sense doing that for a commercial setup, but as a hobbyist, I don't see that there's that kind of need. We're not into trying to get 90 or 95% success rate through to sales. All we want to do is get a portion of these batches and be able to raise
right,
them
but
up.
so
Now,
if you're in Sophie's case,
we can condition them while they're still together.
Yes, but so if you're in Sophie's case,
it's just we didn't know that.
Right, we know you didn't know that years ago. But so in Sophie's case, the seahorses aren't lasting past 2 weeks. What's wrong? What can she do?
Well, at this point, she has to keep on trying. It's because we have no way to know for sure what the actual cause is. She has to try to beef up the immune capabilities of the seahorses. She has to be more diligent in cleaning and sterilizing the containers before reusing. Um, the food, you have to make sure that it's not carrying any bacteria, which means before it gets in, it has to be treated somehow. And usually, um, I use the peroxide, but um, now
The
You guys did
maybe
peroxide
say,
the
changed everything for me. After when Ray and Dan told me about using the peroxide to clean the food for the fry, game
yes.
changer. I stopped having losses at that age
And
when I
Sophie, I
started doing
think we talked about this before. Did you start that?
I did start that. I did. Do you remember when I did 2 separate jars, one with
that. Hmm.
peroxide and one without the peroxide?
Hmm.
Kinda. Go ahead.
I did do that, except they all died anyways. So
Right.
I did not see a difference in that.
So
But I will, yeah. No, actually, I didn't do it with the 4 fry that I got from my third and a
Hmm.
half batch. But I will keep doing that for
so
the
we
batch of
kind of we kind of just jumped around all over the board. So I want to go back and say, so the first thing is, if you've got fry that aren't lasting past a week or two, you look at the parents, right?
Hmm.
Are the parents old enough? If they're just not old enough, if they're new, you just got to give it time. Bottom line, there's nothing else you can do. You got to give it time. Well, I shouldn't say there's nothing else you can do. If
Well, do
you're
your
able,
best on the other end too, I say, but don't think it's all you.
right. But so trying to put this in order here. If you've got fry that don't last a week or two, look at the parents. Are they old enough? Is this their first batch? Don't beat yourself up if it is. And then also you can start, if they're in a if you know they're breeding, you can start things if you're capable. If in your area it's possible. When I had a pair that was breeding and I knew it, I would get live feeds. And I don't mean for fry, I mean for the adults. I would get live mysids and I would enrich Artemia, feed them to the mysids, and then feed them to the seahorses. That's extensive. That's when you really want fry. It's not a
Hmm.
must, but I'm saying there are things you can do to condition. As Ray said, you can make sure that you're keeping that tank super clean. I mean, like even your regular maintenance routine, up it. Like make sure the water is really good for them and that they're really happy, and maybe even feed a bit more if they'll eat it, right? Don't leave leftovers in the tank ever when we're talking about the adults, but feed them more, beef them up, get them really sturdy and stable, and then they'll give you better batches and give them just time, right? And then, as Holly was saying, when we're talking about once you get to the fry stage, then you can make sure that you're giving. I don't know where Holly keeps going, but there she is. Then, once you start getting viable fry, because I don't think that Sophie's fry were viable. Like they weren't. I shouldn't say it like that. They weren't non-viable. They were formed. They were
It's hard
fry,
when they're weak, when they're
but they were
small and
little.
weak.
They
Yeah,
were
when they're
little. Yeah,
small and weak. I kind of learned that as I went because it's hard when you're starting out and you have no comparison.
right.
So I could tell by when Sandy had his batch, that was the 163. When he had his big batch, they just looked better than his earlier
Healthier, bigger.
batches. And more of them survived. That was the batch I was able to raise over 20 to adults in
Yep.
that batch. And my previous batches, and Sadie was his second batch. I lost the whole first batch because I had no food for them. It was winter. The brine shrimp wouldn't hatch. It was too cold. I lost that batch, which was only, I want to say, about 30 or so anyway. Sadie's batch was about 50 maybe or so. And I got 5 survivors to adults out of that batch. I had a batch in between where Scrappy Doo was the only one I raised to adult. And that's how he got his name, was because he struggled. He came
Yeah,
from, there
but
was like
Holly, why?
13
Why?
born, and there was only 3 that survived past a week.
Why?
And I kept them going till I got him on frozen food, and then he grew. Another key, I think, is the faster you can get them onto frozen,
Sure.
the better they'll do, because the brine shrimp alone is not even enriching it. I don't think it's the best nutrition for them. They can't survive on it for long.
Sure.
So,
So wait. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's back up a little bit because Holly and Ray are having a private conversation here about whether or not her seahorses. So let's back up to step 1. Step 1 is if your fry aren't lasting past a week or 2, look at the parents. And I said, are they old enough? Right? That's A. Are they old enough? How many batches have they had? Because they're gonna have trial and error as they figure it out as they grow up. If you're talking about 3 to 4 inch seahorses, you know, they don't
and
have
that
the
was
body.
mine.
They don't even have the body to carry or make the eggs and then carry the fry to fruition to make these huge batches that we're talking about. So definitely don't beat yourself up if you just have young seahorses. But Ray asked, do your seahorses look like, I can't do it. Do your seahorses sides look like this, or like this, right? And this is concave, right? This means they need more food. You're not feeding them enough. This, we'll ask Ray what that means. And then this means they're fat and plump and ready to have babies. Ray, what does it mean if they're straight? If they're not concave, but they're not extended?
If it's just straight, well, they're so condition.
Yeah.
Like they're not as bad as sunk, but they're definitely not in top condition.
So,
I'm just going to type it out for anybody that wants on.
well, while you're getting ready to type, because I'm going to move on, but do you think that she should feed more?
Do I
She
think
should
what?
feed more?
She's going to have to feed more frequently,
Gotcha.
probably. Because if you start trying to feed more at a time, you're ending up pushing the food through the digestive tract, and it's not getting the nutrient extracted because it's such a rudimentary
Great
system.
point. So what you're saying is if Sophie's feeding, what, 2-3 times a day?
4 times.
4. She's feeding 4 times a day.
How much are you feeding? It's
I don't
hard
know.
to say. I know. Are you using
Yeah,
cubes?
that's what I'm like. I go through about a cube a day.
You only go through a cube a day?
Well, you're hand feeding them though, right? 'Cause I've watched you feed them.
Time out.
Do you feed them till they're done eating, till they don't want to eat anymore?
No, I don't feed them till they don't want to eat.
Try that, because you're only giving them a little piece at a time.
Okay.
So I would say give them time, because you're not wasting food.
Okay.
So I would say you can sit there and slowly feed them a little at a time until they kind of lose
So
interest.
Sophie
Okay,
doesn't have
losing
time
now.
to sit and feed and do this over and over again. But I would say,
But it doesn't take them
Okay, hang
long,
on.
though,
Shh.
normally. I
Let
don't
Sophie
think it
talk.
will.
They do Okay, I would say that lose interest. Okay, they'll still eat, but they do lose interest at the end.
Yes.
They do.
That's when you want to stop.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think.
It depends. Sometimes if I'm in more of a rush, they don't lose interest.
Yeah.
But if I do
And
sit
then
there
you're
with them,
leaving
they
them,
do.
yeah.
Generally, they do.
So I would
Mhm.
say, if you're only feeding a cube a day, that you're not feeding enough, for
Okay.
sure. That's no way. I feed 3 seahorses almost a cube every time I feed. Like, and like what, Ray?
Oh.
Are you gonna give thoughts?
I've never used
Yeah.
cubes.
I don't either, so I don't have anything really to say about that as far as how much. But I would say it's good to feed them because you're only feeding them a little at a time. You're not polluting your tank. So I would say if you can each feeding, you've noticed when their time is up, when they start to lose interest, and stop feeding them at that point instead of when they're acting like they're still hungry. And that way they're getting a little more food, and that might help.
So
Okay.
Andre asked, if you feed them until they don't want food anymore, isn't there a danger of food left over that increases biological load?
But not the way she's feeding, right? Because she's only using a dropper
Okay.
and giving them a piece at
But
a
let's-
time.
let's-
I wouldn't say there is, because I kind of, number one is that I have a huge cleanup crew. Like, my peppermint shrimp have become crazy for the food.
But hang
so
on,
Oh, yeah.
time out, because Ray always makes the point, your cleanup crew might eat it, but they poop it and it's still in the tank. But go ahead.
But generally, if I notice that they aren't, if they don't want the food anymore, I stop feeding it to them. So at max,
Yeah.
there's like a few pieces extra, but not a ton, not really to make a big difference, I would say.
So, and for Andre, again, so she is not doing broadcast feeding. The way that I
Yeah,
typically,
she's hand
the way that I typically feed is broadcast feeding, where the food goes flying, and if you're feeding too much, it can end up under crevices. And totally agree with you. That's why when when I have new seahorses, I first start out trying to figure out how much they need to eat, right? And but in Sophie's case, so that when I do I'm backing up. So that when I do the broadcast feeding, I know most of it's going to get eaten, and I sit there and I observe and I remove any uneaten food, because absolutely extra food that gets left in the tank can add to major problems. But in Sophie's case, she doesn't even feed that way. She target feeds. So she literally feeds the seahorses one at a time. She's nuts. The only seahorses I ever did that for were Barbori, and that's because they would not eat off the floor. I can't imagine taking the time to broadcast feed to every seahorse, but that's what she wants to do. Go ahead.
That's my dad. So he has fed my seahorses the exact same way when I was gone.
Uh-huh. Tell Dad we need tough love. We need to be like, here's the food, eat it or not. You ain't getting it pieced.
But I don't see. I feel like that's because you spend the time. So you throw it all in the tank. Well, all you throw it in the tank, and then you spend the time taking it out. So I instead spend the time feeding it, and then I don't have to worry about taking it out, which I feel like I would cause a bigger problem, because I feel like I wouldn't be able to take it all out. And
So you're going to lose this argument.
It's
is what
hard.
you're going to lose. You're going to lose
It's
this
hard.
argument. No, I'm just teasing. But no,
But I like your way. I think it's the best way, honestly, if you have time. I'm a
I think so.
multitasker, so I put my food in, let them all eat and go at it while I'm doing other stuff, and then I come back and suck out what they didn't eat. if I could sit there and individually feed them, I think it would be cleaner and better for them. And like Ray said, it's so slow a process that you're not having them eat too fast.
Yeah, but
So I think it's ideal, but it's very
so
labor
I'm going to
intensive.
disagree with all of you on that point, because I think if they're chasing food, they're getting exercise, so to
Well,
speak.
Okay.
Time out. Let me finish. And then B, if they're chasing food, so I'm not saying it's a good thing for us humans. When you're full, stop eating. You don't need to eat more. But for seahorses, if they're chasing food and they don't even realize they're full and they eat more, good. And I would say that your argument about, well, you're taking the time to clean it up afterwards. No, I didn't. Not after I honed it in. Right. So once I figured out
the right
how much they
amount.
needed in each feeding, there is no magic, like, oh, they need 0.25 grams.
And they
But
change.
once
Mine
you
don't
figure
eat the
out
same
how
amount
much
all
your
the time.
seahorses eat in a feeding, if you let it fly, they will find every piece. I promise you that. But Sophie, were you gonna say something else, or she had to walk away? I think. Ray, were you gonna say something?
Hold on, I'm back.
Okay.
No, I forget what I was about to say.
Parents
No,
need you to
I don't
go.
know.
I
You
know
can
it's
move.
10 o'clock. Tell the parents I'm sorry. 5 minutes, we're done. All right.
It's
Go ahead.
okay. They're fine.
Okay. But what were you gonna say? Because you were gonna argue with me about something. I love it.
I don't
You don't remember.
I don't
My
know.
brain isn't working that well.
Okay.
One second. I'm just trying to find. I'm just trying to charge the computer to find a wire.
Okay. Well, Ray, you're saying stuff in the chat. Sophie's feeding by hand is a slower feeding method, so the tract won't get filled as fast and extracts more nutrients from the seahorses before excretion. I mean, I get it.
For the purposes of overall best scenario for the tank itself, Sophie's method, in my opinion, is the best method if you could do it.
I would agree with that.
Not
too.
everybody could do it. I couldn't do it.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have the patience to sit there and do it. So the method is not a good method for me. But if I did do it, it would be better than my broadcast method. Other than the fact, I also agree that the broadcast method gets them active, gets them to move and swim through the tank, exercising them.
I think it depends.
Hers don't need exercise. They're getting plenty.
Well, I think it depends on how many seahorses you have too, right? When you have,
Oh, there's another thing too. It's going to depend on the size and size of the tank and the number of seahorses in there, because I found some years ago that a bigger tank with a little bit more dense population, but just having more seahorses in the tank, they were definitely more active with 6 in a 90 than 2 in a 30.
Totally agree.
And so you've got so many different variables that you have to look at and to consider how you're going to handle your particular situation. Like my 90-gallon tank, when I had 6 or 8 seahorses in that, I had to treat that completely different from a 40-gallon tank where I only had a parrot.
I totally agree with Ray, and it's interesting because I've noticed that as well. And I think the thing is that food is a competition instigator, as well as mating. So when they feel like they're competing for food, they might be more active in pursuing it as opposed to just a pair or a few seahorses, in a big tank where they feel like, oh, there's plenty of food. I don't need to chase it because there's not very many seahorses competing with me.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say, Kelly, when I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry.
It was that I still exercise mine. Generally, it's to dodge my cleanup crew because they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But they still it's my dog. They still get
Dog's
chased
head.
from like the side, from like both sides. Another reason why I don't like doing the broadcast feeding is I don't like turning off my flow or anything in it. I know you guys turn off your flow, because I always forget to turn it back on. So I found that if I just do the target feeding, I don't ever turn off the flow. And so then I don't ever forget to turn it off. Because another thing with my flow is my filter. So I would turn off the power head and I would turn off the filter. And if I forgot the filter off, yeah, it would cause problems.
Yeah, that happened to my seahorse sitter.
Everyone's system's different. Yeah. So what it's kind of like whatever works for you. And I'm with Ray. I actually feed different ways in different
Yep.
tanks, depending on who's living in it and what, the way they're comfortable eating.
So real quick, I want
and
to
the
say,
layout of the tank.
real quick, I want to say, totally agree. I lost some seahorses when I went on vacation, and my mother-in-law had to turn off flow and turn it back on, and she didn't, and it was connected to the power. And basically, yeah, I came home to a really bad situation. However, in this modern day and age, if you're using tanks, bigger tanks, the Jabeo, any power head that you get will have a feed mode, right? So you hit the feed mode and the pump turns itself back on after.
Well, see, I'm using Ray's really old pumps.
I know. You're following Ray's.
Really reliable,
wrong
but
with
not
that.
new technology.
But yes,
No, that's great because they'll never
to
break.
answer Andre, broadcast feeding is more or less throwing food in and then they look for it. Yes. But I did post a link to a video that I talk about the 3 different feeding methods if you want to check it out. Broadcast, target, and I guess dish feeding are the
feeding dish.
And for TP said, can you share what conditioning meant for those that got disconnected during that explanation? Real quick, I just want to say I'm so excited that we have you new people coming. TP and all the new people that have asked. Andre, man, we love having new people. When you guys don't come, we just sit here and talk about fry all night. We don't want to do that. So, keep coming back for sure. And if you'd like to join in the video, we're willing to have you anytime. But for the conditioning, Ray, do you want to start out what conditioning means? Or do you want me to?
Well, conditioning is basically getting the seahorse's body more capable to resist diseases that they have, but it's also, when it's better conditioned, it's going to be able to produce fry, more viable fry, and easier and bigger numbers.
How do you do it?
And,
how do you condition seahorses?
It's a case of feeding more often, not more at a time.
Okay.
And sometimes, depending on your seahorse, it may involve enriching live food with a high DHA enrichment. And it's just a constant process. That time, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a very slow process. And sometimes people get fed up because they don't see any change in their seahorse over a couple of months, because there are times you might be sitting there 6 months before you get it to where you need it.
Because you want them to be, what's the opposite of concave? What's the word?
Convex. So like this shape, not.
Yes.
Right. You want them fat.
You want them.
You want them to look like a football shape. Like if you look at them, if they're facing you, their bodies should be shaped like this, not.
Let me try to find a picture or a video of that real quick. But no, and I actually have a video. I think it's one of my top 10 videos, like top 10 false facts about seahorses or top 10 whatever. But basically, I show you never want your seahorse to look like this because my female is concave, but she had just given eggs. And that's why she was concave, is that everything in her just went out in the eggs. And you see the rest of my seahorses that are like, they're fat. They look like they're bulging like crazy. And as far as conditioning, I agree with what they said. It's just feeding more and not leaving excess food in the tank. It is enriched foods like live mysids, but that's a process, right? Because you have to enrich the artemia and then feed that to the mysids and then feed that to the seahorses. Because some seahorses will take enriched adult artemia, but many won't. They don't like the artemia for whatever reason. I would start with trying with enriched adult artemia, though, because the mysids are a pain in the butt. Also, just, I mean, it is like Ray said, it's a process. It's just feeding more. It's
And
keeping their
adding an
tank.
extra feeding if you can, I think
Yeah.
is good. It's hard. I mean, the thing about seahorses in the wild is that they be browsing all day long like cattle grazing.
Yeah.
And we don't do that in our tanks, and it's to their detriment, really. So if you could feed them like 6 times a day, every couple hours, a little bit, that'd be closer to their natural feeding style and better for them. It's just that our schedules and ability to do that is tough. But I mean, if you have a household, where you've got kids and spouses, and somebody can take a shift every couple 2 to 3 hours to feed the seahorses a little bit, that'd probably be great for them.
So I
A long time ago,
just want to
I
say
had
that
someone that I sold seahorses to. He couldn't do the feedings that I was telling him he needed to do. So he worked out a little container that he had on the back of his aquarium, and it had a tube going out into the display tank. He set up a timer, and the timer was, I guess, it's probably an expensive one because it was a timer that would only come on for a minute at a time. What it did was turned an air pump on that was set so that the air was coming this uplift tube here, and he had the food in that little container there. And when he turned this on, it turned on a little magnet stirrer that he had, stirring up this thing, and it also turned on the air pump.
Wow.
So
I don't
the
like
food
that.
and the air pump started forcing this water up and over the tube into the tank, and it would only go for a minute, putting minor amounts of food in the tank, and then it shut down, and then later on it would come on again with a little bit more on it. And I never did get around to none of my timers would go for that little bit of time. And
So wait. Let me stop you there, because really cool idea. I actually had a company reach out to me with a very similar contraption that is now for sale. But the thing is, you've got food
you're worried
sitting.
about the bacteria.
Yes.
I
don't want food sitting anywhere ever.
You wash your food first in peroxide.
Yeah.
Do a peroxide rinse on first, then you've got a pretty decent length of time that you're safe
It's still
to do
sitting
this
in water. No.
Doesn't matter.
No. Nope.
So
not
you
for me.
can rinse their frozen food in peroxide to prevent bacteria?
Well, it's not going to stay frozen in there. We were experimenting with slow thaw things some years ago. Remember those ones that I built up for experimenting with? But I guess you could couple that with this method that he had. so that as the food thawed, it would drop into here, and then the timer would kick it on, and it would be just recently thawed food that would go out and be deposited in the tank. So marrying that together, that would alleviate your concerns.
No, it wouldn't.
I
because-
would say, I would
No,
say,
no,
well,
wait,
yeah,
wait,
if
wait,
it's
wait,
still
wait, wait,
frozen,
wait. Everybody
but
starts
can you
talking at the
treat
same time.
frozen
Holly,
food?
hang on. Let me speak for 1 second, please. So I've seen an extensive system that actually work like that, but they use refrigeration. Okay, that you have to have refrigeration involved so that the food stays refrigerated while it's sitting. If you're not doing all of that, which who can do that on a hobbyist level? I can't. But then any time, Dan used to use the example, if you set a cup of water on the table, how long would you let it sit before you drink it? If you set a piece of shrimp on the table, how long before you'd eat it? That's the same for seahorses. I would not use anything that was not refrigerated in some way that set and fed seahorses on a timer because of the fact that it will cause bacterial issues. I just, nope.
Well,
Go ahead,
does
Ollie.
though that doesn't answer my question because Ray said something interesting about the peroxide. So, can you treat frozen food with peroxide to kill bacteria? Does that work?
This little container on the back, you could put the salt water in there, put some peroxide in it, put the food in it, and it's not going to hurt the tank with peroxided water going into it. Adds oxygen, actually.
Keep the
Does it
food.
kill bacteria enough
Peroxide.
though to make it safe?
Yes, yes,
Interesting.
that's what it's for.
Interesting.
That's why you're sterilizing your fry food.
Yeah,
with,
the brine shrimp and stuff. I know. Well, because I've done that.
Wait,
I never
peroxide
thought of that.
peroxide dissipates.
Yeah,
So,
but the thing is, it still will do something for the start. The water in that tank isn't going to, once it's sterilized with the population or with the peroxide, it's not going to get populated with bacteria in a hurry. The bacteria has to come from somewhere first to restart again.
well, I am willing, if anybody tries it, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to watch. I'm going to say no go for my
Well,
tanks.
he actually he used that system for a few years until he lost his setup when he went on holidays. But then he was so disillusioned for
Yeah,
it all.
I would say it's too tricky. I mean, to control all that, to make sure that the food was getting peroxide treatment and not thawing too fast, and it just seems kind of tricky and labor intensive to me.
It's a really cool thing
do
for
that.
someone like Reed
I like
Foods.
the idea, but I'd never actually considered that you could treat non-live food with peroxide.
I have no doubt I can build something that would work. It's just I couldn't do it to make it commercially viable. Someone else would have to do that kind of thing. But just with things that I could find the lying around, I built those ones before, those delay thaw ones. That was just from stuff lying around. And now, mind you, I got more stuff lying around than most people do.
I do too.
Then,
Sophie,
it can be done. Put it that way. It can be done.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's interesting.
I don't like it.
It's not worth talking about too much because the average person
it.
isn't going to be interested.
Right. No,
That's
it's
it.
too much.
If you
Like I
tell
said,
me
I couldn't do it.
If you tell me there's
Excuse me, what does DP put down there? YDHA. What's that mean?
I don't know. But if you tell me there's an easier way, put peroxide in a cup with some food and use a power head to pump it into the tank. Oh, that sounds great. I think it would cause all sorts of
But
problems
you
in my
know
tank
what? It's
because
good
I
to
wouldn't set it up
know
right.
in an emergency. Like, let's say I'm evacuating seahorses because I have a fire, which happens here,
Mhm.
and I'm transporting them and their food, let's say, and I'm not in a place, where I can keep the food frozen, something's going on and I need to feed them. I can treat their food in a peroxide solution before feeding it to them, and it can help prevent bacteria issues.
So I'm again going to
Things like,
say this channel is not condoning this message because I do not know that that is true. I do not know that that is true. There's no documentation about that. Ray, are you saying that that's correct? You could throw frozen food in some peroxide and it's good to go?
Sorry,
oh,
good.
did you hear?
I
Like
could
I
throw
was
it in.
saying, Ray, here, let me start again. Like, let's say I'm in an emergency situation with my seahorses. There's a fire and I'm evacuating, right? I need to feed the seahorses. Their frozen food is defrosting, so it's not frozen anymore, and I need to feed the seahorses. If I treat the frozen food with peroxide before feeding them, the defrosted food, is that acceptable? Is it safer for them?
Yeah,
Well,
I don't think
the way I look at
that. I don't think we,
anything that you have to do in an emergency, you can't put it on the same level as
right.
everyday
Mhm.
use
Yeah.
in the tank. But you do in an emergency, you're going to do whatever you have the ability to
Mhm.
do, and that you think is going to get you by that emergency. But when we're talking about it for everyday thing, it's a little bit
Yeah.
different.
Sure.
Now, I personally, I'm not as sensitive as Kelly. I know how things work in the bacteria world, how fast things can happen. And if you have sterilized water, you sterilize it with the
Mhm.
peroxide, it's not going to all of a sudden get a bunch of bacteria within 8 hours.
Mhm.
But first of all, it has to be exposed to it somehow, and the only exposure at that point is the air, which is a slower
I
transfer.
Uh-huh.
And then it has to grow enough to coat the food in there, which has already been treated with
Mhm.
peroxide.
but that
Uh,
food could have already been exposed, Ray. Like, and I understand the treatment. I just don't
it,
like
you,
putting this out on the channel because you have a bunch of new people that are watching
Yeah, but
this
if
and
they're
they're not gonna.
listening, I'm talking about an emergency situation. It's not something
Yeah,
to
I don't
do
want to talk about
I'm not
emergency
talking emergency
situation.
situation though.
Mhm.
I'm talking for
So,
everyday
so
use. It is
Sophie,
Mhm.
possible. And if
what I
you're
was gonna
talking
say to you
about
is, my dear,
if
when
the
you have
food's
to run
already
this
been
channel, you're gonna
exposed,
have to shut
Mhm.
them down
Mhm. Mhm.
sometimes. Shut it down. Shut it down. Ray, you're not wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying for the newcomer, this is and
Mhm.
we're going into depths that I'm not even comfortable with, let alone someone new. I understand that you know way more about bacteria, but there's too much of a chance that I'm going to screw it up. And that's even more so for someone new. I think the
Mhm.
idea of
well,
fear.
we weren't talking about this for the everyday person. We were talking
Mhm.
exceptions.
I know, but
Mhm.
that's where we get into trouble because new people jump in and they're like, "Oh, I can, just do this,"
But
even
I'm
though
not a new person, and it's
yes.
good for me to know this because these are the kind of things that I might encounter.
But we're on social media where people jump
That
in
doesn't
and
mean
they hear
everybody
10
here is
seconds.
new, though.
I know, but there's
That
someone
doesn't
new that
mean
jumps
everybody
in.
here is new.
Okay, all right. You know Andre? You know
Well,
TJ,
well,
TP?
think of
No, you don't.
so a
There are people that
disclosure. So I'm saying a
there are people that watch
disclosure.
this channel that come in, and if we're talking about a really super deep topic, I have to back up. Sophie, you will have to back up and say, this is not for a newcomer. We have to make that, because we can literally be sued for saying, hey, go do
But
this
we
in your
said
tank.
that. We said
And
that, though. We already said
okay.
that.
But
I
if they
already
come
said
in
if
and
I'm
they
in an
watch,
emergency
all right, I'm done arguing.
situation
I'm done
transporting
arguing. I'm
seahorses.
done arguing. Okay, we're done with this. We're gonna do Happy Wine Wednesday because now I'm getting irritated. Sophie, did you have anything else to share?
No, I did not.
All right, sorry guys, and I love that we bring up very extensive topics, and that we have DIY guys and we have people that can do different things. If you are a newcomer, please stick to the basics, is all I'm trying to say. And I just want the channel to remain a place where, you know, anybody can come in and ask a question, and we don't go deep diving into what, you know, somebody can do versus someone that's brand new, is all. And best to call me Ray, as the girls would not likely think of gentlemen. There you go. See? And Andre is new. Andre, my computer is
Yeah.
acting up. I can't even show your messages. I can't even show your messages. I'm sorry. If I'm freezing, I apologize, guys. Real quick, Ray, what did you mean by DHA? That's what asking.
DHA, I can't actually pronounce the darn words.
Right.
DHA is your omegas. Specifically, I think it's omega 6, maybe 3. I can't even remember for sure now.
But it's
But it's
basically what.
something that seahorses need. Seahorses cannot manufacture it for themselves. Much of life is able to manufacture themselves things like the DHA, but not all. So if they can't get it that way, they have to get it through their food. And things like brine shrimp, if you feed brine shrimp or guppies or something like that, you're not going to be able to get the DHA in them unless you enrich them with a high component DHA. And most people would have hard time finding a good DHA enrichment, to be honest with you. I was buying mine out of California, but because I was buying on such a large scale, it was okay for me to do that. If anybody does need some, it's basically Schizochytrium algae that is used for it, and Brine Shrimp Direct uses it in their food makeup for fish, both marine and freshwater. So if you wrote to them and asked them nice and explain the situation, you might be able to talk them into selling you some to be able to use in your own situation. It's actually much better than using the what are those emulsions that are sold now? Can't get the words in my mind.
Selco, I think, was one of the enrichment.
Yeah, Selco and Selcon, similar. And they have a lot of different varieties, and you can get high DHA component if you're in the right area, but not all areas have it. And most of the time, what is available is emulsions. Emulsions are terrible because they don't last long. And especially when you go to the store and if you're buying it from the store, they haven't had the brains to keep it in a refrigerator. They're keeping it on a bloody shelf. So that cuts down the shelf life of it anyway. So there's no way you're going to get through the whole thing before it's gone bad on you. So if you can find the powders, like the Algamac 3050, which is the Schizochytrium algae, then that's much better. something you can keep in the freezer, and it lasts and lasts and lasts. I've got some still in the freezer now. I've probably had 15 years now. So it keeps very well. But if you ever have an emulsion enrichment, it's not going to last. So be very wary. And it smells bad to begin with, but if it all of a sudden starts smelling worse, ditch it. We lost the boss.
Yep.
She's tired of listening to me anyway.
Well, are there any more questions?
Not that I have. Haven't seen
Yeah,
anything new questions coming up.
Yeah, I don't
Do
see
you
anything.
guys have anything to add?
I would only say
Nope.
about like when you're conditioning seahorses, like we were talking about, probably the easiest way is just more frequent feedings of the frozen mysis. Would you agree, Ray? More frequent, a little bit, several times.
I would start with that. And if you don't get anywhere after, say, about 3 months, then consider using some live food
Mhm.
that you're enriching with the high DHA component. And once they're enriched, feed them and see if you can improve the rate of improvement that way.
Yeah.
Something I just thinking about here, TP's getting into this situation here. There is something I'd like to discuss with him. It's not a short-term thing, but maybe TP could message me on Messenger, and I can explain about my beliefs, and
Mhm.
it's the concept that I've had for many years that all of a sudden lately now is catching on with the reefing community as well. And that's dissolved organics.
Mhm.
Okay.
So if he can contact me through Messenger, then I can help him out
I
to
think
let him understand.
Kelly also wants to
about-
have him like live. So we
Mhm.
will definitely do that. If TP is fine with that, we'll have him or her, I don't know, have them live. Hopefully one of the coming weeks, so we can do
Mhm.
an episode of setting up a new aquarium.
Mhm.
And TP, you can message Kelly on Messenger. You could message me on Instagram if you have it as well, because I don't know if Kelly will see it. I go under the name Canadian Seaquestrians though. So yeah. Anyways, we'll talk about it, but for now I think we have to go. So
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. Good night, all.
Good night.
say
Happy Wine Wednesday,
Wednesday.
everybody.
I got my water.
And you got your water bottle. See everybody next week.
All right.
Okay, good night,
Good
everyone.
night.